So as you're probably all well aware, and if you're not, you've been listening for a while, my life, and Sarah's included, has gone through a few small changes of late. Right? If I appear to be happier, it's because I am. But if I appear to be exhausted, it's because I am. If I appear to be less focused, it's because I am. Babies, they have a tendency to change things, right? And we're probably well aware of that. Most of you are probably more well aware of that than I am, as I'm still figuring out all the things they change. Needless to say, with that being the case, the week after Mirembe was born, I was not as focused or productive as I might normally be. In fact, I did not realize this till Tuesday, but I taught the wrong class on Sunday morning. Ed taught for me in my absence on the 10th. He taught on John chapter 13, the story of Jesus washing the disciples' feet. Evidence of the lack of my focus was that I prepared the same class that Ed taught the week before, and I taught it again, completely unaware. To make matters worse, to this moment, nobody has told me. Everyone who sat through the class did not even hint to the fact that we'd already done this class last week. Even afterwards, nobody told me. In fact, I didn't realize until Tuesday when I was preparing this week, and that's when I called Judy. I go, Judy, was there something wrong that you noticed with last week's class? Yeah, we already did that. Well, thank you so much, Judy. So I had no clue. And I didn't even say anything this morning, and still nobody said anything. So, while I hope that does not happen again, you should all be forewarned that the presence of Mirembe will profoundly impact my teaching, not always for the better. It will impact especially my illustrations. I know that I look forward to having many illustrations using Mirembe. And I know that I have already heard long before she was born that many of you were looking forward to those illustrations as well. So, today, we'll bring my first illustration inspired by Mirembe. But I'm going to save that for a little later. Now that I've got you hooked and you're going to listen, right? Okay? Because you're going to be waiting. What's that cute little story he's got about the baby? Well, now you're stuck for a little while. So at least I know you're going to pay attention to the first part. So, now, I know that we've been removed from it for a couple weeks, but we had been talking about discipleship and goals. We had said that our goal as a congregation was to become and to make disciples through service and sacrifice. The last time we talked about this topic, we started to make a transition from our personal lives of becoming disciples to that of making disciples. One of the very founding points of discipleship is you can't keep your mouth shut. Right? To be a disciple means we need to share, we need to speak, we need to make disciples. And so we start to turn in that direction today. Now, the purpose of a disciple in Jewish tradition, and we talked about this a little bit this morning, was to become a preservation of lineage and to bring glory to their master. They didn't learn so that they could know more. They learned so that they might teach others. But not so much for the good of others, but so that for the good of the pride and the ego and the lineage of the master. The fame of the master would then spread, and his teachings would then become more renowned, respected, and practiced. Now, being a disciple of Jesus has a lot more depth than that, doesn't it? And it has more to do with the fulfillment of the other person's needs than it does with the fulfillment of some past rabbi's pride. Remember how Jesus, we talked about this morning, how did Jesus say they were going to leave a legacy? How would they know that they were his disciples? Was it because they opened up the school of Jesus? No, he said, they will know you are my disciples by your love for one another. And he wasn't just talking about for those in the church. Jesus never came for himself, but for others. So we turn today a little bit towards the how of disciple making. Just like all of Jesus' teachings, the words didn't matter half as much as the heart. The heart matters quite a bit deal more than the process itself. Okay, look at the Sermon on the Mount. Look how it starts out. The law says, do not commit adultery. I say, do not lust. The law says, do not commit murder. I say, do not hate. Matthew 5 can be summed up with, it doesn't just matter what you do, but it matters how you think about other people. The heart matters so much more. Because believe it or not, when we speak, what's oftentimes seen is not our words, but the heart behind the words. The reasoning and the heart behind the words and actions that are delivered tend to be like a wrapper to the candy, right? What is seen on the outside indicates what's on the inside. It can make a huge difference to how we perceive what is there. Now, since I promised you a baby illustration at the beginning, you're probably now beginning to wonder, what is he going to say? What kind of story? What did she do? And how am I going to bring in Mirembe into a discussion on disciple making? Hopefully I won't disappoint you too much in saying that the illustration isn't so much about something Mirembe did as it is about something that has become a very integral part of her life. So, what is one of the most important pieces of equipment you can have for a baby? What? Food? Okay, that's very important, right? But what happens after they eat the food? Diapers! Diapers! Yes. So my illustration is about diapers. I brought a special diaper for us today. As I show you this diaper, what do you think is inside? What do you think it smells like? Because I can smell it right now. What do you think it smells like? That's closer than you know. How would you feel if I handed this to you? Say I handed it to Janie, and I asked Janie, would you pass it to Walt? And Walt, would you pass it to Gail? Would you just pass it all around so that everybody got a chance to hold this? How would you feel about that? What if I asked you to open it? Would you please open this diaper and find out what's inside? Now, deep down, you're probably thinking, or at least hoping, in your rational mind, there is no way that Zach would bring a dirty diaper into church and then make me open it just to find Mirembe's business. But on the surface, as we heard from all the moans and groans, right? We don't tend to be so rational. Because what made up our mind of what's inside here is by what's seeing what's outside. We're probably overcome with the possibility of what could be inside. What we expect to be inside. And therefore we're disgusted by the idea of opening the diaper because we know what a diaper is supposed to have in it. Right? It matters very, very, very little what I put in the diaper. Good or bad, simply by showing you the diaper, you are going to assume that what's inside is bad, aren't you? And you're prepared to discard it immediately without even looking inside to see what's there. The presentation of the gospel tends to act much in the same manner. Our lives, our attitudes, the gentleness or the harshness of our words, they are what encase or wrap the gospel that we've been sent out with. How we present the gospel, or rather how we live our lives, presents the gospel. That's what we wrap it in. And that may be just as important. In fact, it's probably more important than the actual content of the words we're sharing itself. Now, Janie, would you like to open this for me? No? Really?
I'll open it if it's $100.
I'm going to open the diaper. I'm going to open the diaper. What's inside? What's inside the diaper? Now, does that disgust you or does that look good?
I don't want to see.
You don't want to see it? Is that disgusting or is that good? Now, what if I took the same exact thing that was in the diaper and now asked you if you'd like some of this? That wrapper Jane, do you want to open this?
Yes.
Wow, does that wrapper make a big difference, doesn't it? Now, does that mean what's inside that diaper is bad?
No.
No. That is a clean, unused diaper full of chocolates, Reese's cups, and chocolate syrup. There is absolutely nothing wrong with the candy, and you know what? I would feel bad about eating that. Because that is very clean. It's very clean. But if I asked you to eat that, wouldn't you think twice about it? Not because there's anything wrong with the candy, right? And not because the diaper was ever used for anything disgusting, but just because what the diaper represents. By simply putting the candy into the diaper, I have not changed the candy in the slightest way, but I have changed the way that you perceive the candy. The truth of the gospel is no different, based on who is sharing it. It doesn't matter if I share it, Gail shares it, Dwight shares it, Kurt shares it. It doesn't matter. The truth of the gospel is always the same. But the way that others perceive and think about it is directly impacted by the way that we act and speak. Not just the way we act and speak when we deliver it, but the way we act and speak in every aspect of our lives. If I've worked with you for 5 years and I decide today I'm going to share the gospel with you, the last 5 years of actions and the way that I treat you makes a difference about how you view what's inside there. Does my wrapper look like that? Does my wrapper look like this? It's pretty safe to say that you were disgusted by what was in the diaper long before I opened it and actually showed you what was inside. You had already predetermined just by looking at it that what was inside was not of any value whatsoever. And the way we live our lives, the words we use, the gentleness we speak with, whether we lift up or tear down, whether we criticize or whether we encourage, those are the things that people look at and say, what is coming out of their mouths doesn't have any value. What is inside them doesn't have any value. Turn with me over to 1 Corinthians chapter 6. 1 Corinthians chapter 6. 1 Corinthians chapter 6. We're going to start in verse 1. When one of you has a grievance against another, does he dare to go to law before the unrighteous instead of the saints? Or do you not know that the saints will judge the world? And if the world is to be judged by you, are you incompetent to try trivial cases? Do you not know that we are to judge angels? How much more, then, matters pertaining to this life? So if you have such cases, why do you lay them before those who have no standing in the church? I say this to your shame. Can it be that there is no one among you wise enough to settle a dispute between the brothers? But brother goes to law against brother, and that before unbelievers? To have lawsuits at all with one another is already a defeat for you. Why not rather suffer wrong? Why not rather be defrauded? But you yourselves wrong and defraud even your own brothers. Now, Paul's emphasis here is not treat each other better. But rather, Paul is trying to say, do you know what your actions, your words are doing to the gospel? Who wants to be a part of that? This so-called family that fights and sues and calls the police on one another. Their message can't be very good at all if that's what they do with it. There's been a huge shift in our culture today. When people evaluate a message, the worth of your message to them is not based so much on how intelligent it sounds, or what kind of words you use, or how wise you are, but the worth of your message is based on what kind of impact it has. Perception, especially today, is extremely, extremely important. Think about it. How do you think that our community, as they drive by, views this congregation? How do they perceive us without ever having stepped in? Perception, it matters greatly to whether they will even listen to what is said or not. Listen to what Paul said. It does not matter if the gospel is present or not. To have lawsuits at all, we are already defeated. And we're not talking about fights in the congregation today. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about more along the lines of perception. To use the words we use, the way we treat each other, and more importantly, perception of this congregation is not developed on Sunday mornings. Perception of this congregation is developed when they run into you in the supermarket, at work. Because how many people do you run into today that you've never met before? Not that many, okay? But how many people do you run into that you've never met before as soon as you walk outside? That's where perception of the whole congregation is developed. A discredited message isn't a message at all, but rather it's only a bunch of annoying noise. Paul said something about that too, didn't he? And a little further on in 1 Corinthians 13:1, he said, if I speak in the tongues of men and of angels, but have not love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. Now, I'm not saying that we are nothing more than noisy gongs or clanging cymbals, but I am saying that if we do not consider perception, if we do not consider the way that people from the outside see our lives as we live and interact with them, if we are not concerned about, before I even open my mouth, do I look like, act like, seem like a Christian, then we have become dangerously close to becoming noisy gongs and cymbals. And we become dangerously close to discrediting the gospel we proclaim. I read something by Richard Racing a while back. Earlier in his career, he worked for a cleaning company. He cleaned toilets. Do you know what the most important thing to do is when cleaning a bathroom? Well, according to him, and I think this is a pretty good idea, I would support him on this stance. According to him, the most important thing to do when cleaning a bathroom is to turn around and sit on the toilet. Because when you sit on the toilet, you see the bathroom from the view of the person who's going to be occupying it. He says, I can clean all day long, but if the stall is not clean from the view of the person on the seat, we have problems. The bathroom might actually be clean, but if it does not look clean from the perspective of those using it, they will think it's dirty. So it is with the church and the gospel. How is the body of Christ generally perceived? Do people look at the building, and as they drive by, they make vast statements, vast thoughts and expressions of, oh, this is how that whole congregation is? Sometimes, but rarely. More generally, like he already said, people's determination of what this congregation is based on a person's experience with one individual from a congregation. They hear, oh, you're from that church down the road, and suddenly every interaction they've had with you is how they perceive the whole congregation is. Your individual actions, the way we speak, the way we love or don't love, speak for the whole. Don't think that in Corinth that the entire congregation was just going around suing each other. Okay? There was probably only a couple. But those couple, they damaged the message of the gospel for the entire congregation. And because those couple damaged the reputation for the whole congregation, Paul had to write a letter to the whole church. The way that I personally, myself, and you as well, each one of us, every single one of us has the same impact. That's something we need to hear. Don't be fooled into thinking that this person has more of an impact than I do, and it's all about them. The way people perceive you is just as important to the gospel as the way people perceive me. The way that I personally carry myself in my everyday interactions, it impacts the entire congregation. And the way that people will perceive every single person, and more importantly, the way that people will perceive the gospel of Christ. If my actions cause the wrapper on the gospel to look a lot more like a diaper, what are people going to perceive of what is inside? If my life looks like that, what are they going to think of what I'm living for, speaking of, and trying to get them to become a part of? Probably not going to go well. How many people have given up church entirely and lost faith in the gospel due to the actions of one person? But this isn't all about what happens when we don't act good. There's another side to that as well. How many people have come to faith and view the church as having an eternal impact because of the actions of one person? I mean, think about it. How many of us today came to this church congregation because one person took me in. One person invited me. One person treated me with the respect that I can't get anywhere else. It wasn't the congregation that got them here. It was one person. James chapter 3, verse 17 and 18, it reads, "But the wisdom from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, open to reason, full of mercy and good fruit, impartial and sincere. And a harvest of righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace." Very, 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 very great things are impacted by very, 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 very small actions. Walk through the grocery store. Okay? Look at all the brands of pasta you can get. And notice how a simple wrapper can change what brands you choose to buy. If you're into whole grains, what color wrapper are you going to buy? Probably the brown wrapper, right? If you're going for a kid's cereal, what kind of wrapper are you going to buy? Probably the bright one with many colors. Right? There is a whole lot that goes into a person's decision to accept the gospel message. God prepares and conditions so that when the word is heard, the soil is ready. If we choose to use gentle, kind, and peaceful words, we are meticulously preparing the soil of lives around us. As we go out with the gospel message, we must examine our attitudes, our words, our methods, our everyday life. When you sit down on the seat, what does your life look like from the perception of others? Are we critical or uplifting? Negative or encouraging? Are our words hurtful or are they life-giving? Do we draw others near, or do we push them away? Our lives are the wrappers of the gospel. And if Reese's peanut butter cups are the gospel, do our lives look like that, or do they look like that? Because which one do you expect to open and find a peanut butter cup? Okay? Both contain peanut butter cups, right? But which one would you choose to reach into and eat a peanut butter cup out of? This matters a whole lot. Our lives are the wrappers surrounding the gospel. So what does our wrapper say about what's underneath?